Welcome back, everyone, to the September edition of Talks and Takes. Thanks for joining us again, and thanks again to ABC Fitness Solutions for sponsoring this since its inception. We appreciate their support a great deal. So before we get started on the list today, I just want to make one correction of something that was said at the last session. We talked about club closures briefly, and it was mentioned that there were 9,000 clubs closed. In reality, the total number of clubs that closed was 13,000, not 9,000. So it was 13,000 clubs out of a total number of 59,000 clubs. Our good friend and colleague, Rick Carroll, along with IHRSA, did the research. And the research was really looking at club closures from March of 2020 through the end of June of 2021. And overall, it represented 22% of clubs closed. More specifically, 27% of those were studios, 14% of those were clubs. So just wanted to make that correction. News was a little worse than what was said earlier in the last episode. So with that said, that's a good segue to the GYMS Act. We always want to make sure we're getting an update on the GYMS Act if we can. So I'll show this quick video.
Restaurants and gyms and live entertainment venues, small businesses of all kinds have made it known. They've been left in the cold and they need our help. I applaud the legislation that we're considering today, yet while the $25 billion allocated here to support small businesses is a vital and worthy investment, I say that we can and we must do more. That's why I'm pleased to share that with the support of the Speaker and leadership of Chairwoman Velasquez, that the small business committees in the House and Senate will soon begin working on a targeted small business relief package to help those industries who are still in great and sometimes desperate need.
So he said it pretty well. There's the story. The bad news is relief, the GYMS Act, is not going to be included in the reconciliation bill, at least not at this point. There's still a little bit of hope out there, but it appears not very likely. The good news is there is still bills that are being considered by the Small Business Committee. They're working on them right now. They're talking about a bill that would include several small businesses like restaurants, live venues, and health clubs and gyms for a specific relief act. The focus of this reconciliation bill that's coming out doesn't include relief for any of those types of businesses. It's all focused on really minorities and the disadvantaged and programs to help them recover from the pandemic. And then just as another note about the GYMS Act, there has been great progress made. At the beginning of the pandemic, there was talk about, oh, we just need to get a seat at the table. The health and fitness industry just doesn't have a voice on the Capitol Hill. And we really have accomplished that now with the number of senators that have signed on to the relief bill, the number of House representatives that have signed on to the relief bill. We are indeed having those conversations. In fact, there's a team from IHRSA that's on Capitol Hill today, meeting with senators and congressmen directly. And it's some of the IHRSA advocacy team, the new CEO of IHRSA, Liz Clark, and it's also the National Health and Fitness Alliance Advisory Council made up of club members, including Gail Landers and others. And they're up there today and tomorrow fighting the fight, having direct conversations. So we're really optimistic about getting some relief at some point. And we appreciate all of y'all's support and we hope you'll keep it up. And Blair, I know you've played a large part in that, certainly in your state, but also nationally. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, as of today, we have 25 of the 100 senators as co-sponsors right now, and that very well could go up. And that's a major representation there. 155 in the House, 25 in the Senate. I'm immensely proud of our industry for the push that's gone here. Yep.
Yeah, I'm as well. And yet we're still continuing to live with COVID. Blair, segue to you, sir. So what you mean by that?
Well, I do, and maybe a lot of you do, subscribe to a lot of what McKinsey does. And if you don't subscribe to them, you should. They just have a lot of great information and research, and they're a global company that does tremendous consulting for the Global 2000. And they produce a lot of research that you can access for free. So they had an article last week called Living with COVID. And some of the salient points from the article that they were making is that one, herd immunity is not likely in the short term. That's probably not going to happen. But that it isn't necessary to start kind of tapering into normalcy. And in the United Kingdom, they've started to do that as the Delta variant has kind of blown through. They're estimating that the US could start that transition to normalcy Q4, early Q4, continuing into Q1. You know what's interesting about this round two to me, and think about this, like I haven't heard one peep about closing businesses. Right. Yeah, you look at the case counts, compare it back to the biggest wave we had before when everybody got closed down. There's not a peep about closing businesses. Makes me wonder if there is some recognition that that maybe was not effective, or is it just maybe politically tough to do that now? One of the key things they say is it's got to be managed as a constant threat and not one that requires society-defining interventions. In other words, they say it's got to be managed very much like influenza A and influenza B, where you're managing against severe illness and death and moving away from managing the case counts. And so that's where Singapore is right now, is moving into that. And they see that the wealthier countries are probably going to be moving into that. So as you know, we're sitting here as an industry, and there seems to be kind of a couple factions to me in our industry, those that are out there saying, let's go, let's take advantage of sort of these waves of people that are more and more interested in health and wellness. Some of these companies are private equity backed, and they're just stepping on the gas pedal and moving fast. And then there seems to be this other sort of waiting in fear a little bit, like I'm not sure what to do in waiting in fear. And I guess my encouragement is for everybody to start getting out ahead of this, because it is going to go away. And there's going to be a massive opportunity out there. So I guess, you know, given those data points, how do you guys kind of see this playing out?
I have to say, when I heard you saying there's a trend to normalcy in the UK, I wanted to burst out laughing. I'm sorry, Blair, but usually I agree with everything you say. I just got back from Scotland not 3 days ago. I flew over because my niece had twins that I'd never met before, and she was from Singapore. She got to go to the UK. So I went to the UK, figured it's easier to go there. The forms I had to fill out were insane. I had to do a Verify app. I had to do my UK government application. And I had to, of course, document I was double vaccinated and that I also had a negative COVID test within 72 hours. Then I get to the UK and they require you to take 2 days after you get there, you have to get another COVID test. And then 3 days before you leave, you have to get another COVID test and you have to register all of this. And they tracked me down here. Just yesterday, I got 3 emails, 2 text messages, and 3 phone calls saying, we haven't gotten your next COVID test. I'm like, I've already left your country. So if you think we're going to be, I think, you know, Singapore is also, when they go back to from the UK back to Singapore, they are literally locked in a hotel room for 2 weeks, locked. And you're not allowed to pick your hotel, and the door is locked. People can bring you food, but it's monitored. And it's just, so there's a governmental influence that we don't have here in the USA, thank goodness, okay? But we don't have here. So I have to say, if private businesses don't jump in, I'm not quite sure where we're gonna end up.
Yeah, I think one of the points they make in this, Sarah, is that it's a very slow transition, that it requires a ton of tracking. And what they're talking about return to normalcy is not having capacity limits on businesses, not having to wear masks everywhere, not having to show a vaccine card. That's kind of the main 3 points that they're making in it. But yeah, certainly there's a lot of, you know, how they're going to move from pandemic to endemic to manage it is probably a lot of the stuff that you're pointing out, right? That's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a pain.
Yeah, and the reality is, you know, there's mandates, there's guidelines, there's recommendations, and then there's what people actually do.
Right.
We hosted a big roundtable meeting here in Dallas last week, and, most of the businesses went to several restaurants, went to two different hotels for events. And it's, people are wanting and desperately wanting to get back to some sort of normalcy. Like you said, Blair, thank goodness we're not hearing about possible club closures anymore or businesses of any kind.
That's right. Which is a perfect segue to COVID discipline too.
Yes. So Bill, take it away, sir.
Yeah, I just, we're talking about a lot of things going on right now with regard to COVID. And I'm looking at these other industries. I'm looking at the airline industry. And, the stats are out of control as far as 85% of flight attendants have reported some type of altercation, with 17% of those being physical in nature. That's insane. We've got, and the issue that's going on right now is the extremes are getting more extreme. So it's just not the number of hostile or aggressive or frustrated incidents. They're getting more extreme. And so this thing with normalcy and discipline and tempers being high and emotions being high, what is going to be normal isn't going to be the same normal that was normal before, right? I mean, taking off our shoes when we went on an airplane was not normal for a long period of time. Now it's normal unless you're TSA or clear or whatever, so it is going to be a new paradigm. And gyms have got to understand, that we have an obligation to our members and our staff in protecting them with safe environments and de-escalating. I talk about de-escalation a lot. We didn't hire people to be police officers, in our clubs. We hired them to be hospitable and say yes when they can and serve people. And yet they're being in a situation now where they have to have a whole new skill set. The TSA is doing self-defense training for flight attendants. I mean, who would have thought that part of your job as a flight attendant is to understand the principles of self-defense? So, what I wanted to kind of hit on in this segment is, domestic violence since COVID started, it's up 8.1% since this thing started. Everybody's baseline is affected here with stress levels, with aggression, with all these things. And so we've got to teach our teams to de-escalate and prepare them to de-escalate. And we don't do training on this, but on this show we don't do training. This is information and trending and sharing news and so on. But it's critical for us to do some preparation for de-escalation training tips with our staff and stay close to that. And so, I just think that having discipline around our rules and also de-escalating, and it's not about masks or no masks, vaccines or no masks, no vaccines. It's about common sense, safety, courtesy, and preparing your staff to deal with those conflicts that are going on right now in society. So, Blair, you've got 2 clubs that are open. We talked last show that you've only had to call the police once, on that first day. I've had to call the police a couple of times myself here. But what do you take of this going on in your facilities with regard to preparation of staff and the discipline that's going to be required for businesses to manage this circumstance?
Well, a lot of it is just the small stuff. If you're not managing the small stuff, then things just grow. And so if you have a mask mandate, or if you are following a mask mandate in your clubs, then being fairly disciplined about where that mask is, if you don't do that, that stuff starts to spread. It's like anything that you start to allow to happen. Now, I hate it. I got to tell you, I love to work out every morning. As soon as that mask mandate went back in, I go into my own clubs, and I'm far less comfortable in my own clubs because I know that we have to be on top of this stuff and have discipline around it, because the minute you let up, then everything loosens up. I will say this as an ongoing thing, as the mask thing goes away, a lot of the things that we did early on, I'm pretty proud of, and those things will stay. And it's a lot of what a lot of people did: air fix systems, different cleaning processes and protocols. And we're going to stay very disciplined to that because of the feedback has been phenomenal around that. And I just think that lives on generally. I'm hoping the mask mandate abates here sometime in the fourth quarter. And if it doesn't, we may just sunset it ourselves. I don't know.
Yeah. And
we-
one thing I just wanted to add about that, Bill, you're right about training people on de-escalation and coaching them a little bit how to handle those situations. The other thing I just want to encourage everybody is your staffs are like the flight attendants, you know, being asked to enforce the rules, and they have their own, you know, challenges. So make sure you're recognizing your staff collectively and individually and letting them know that, you know, they're doing a good job and you appreciate them, especially through the pandemic. They need pats on the back and recognition really more than ever, in addition to the training.
And
I
What-
think that's.
Go ahead, Sarah, you're up.
Blair's just scared that I'm going to disagree with him. But there's, but I was at Rosemont at a huge concert. Of course, you know me and my music. I went to Blake Shelton. Of course, Gwen Stefani shows up. It was packed, thousands and thousands of people. There's an indoor mask mandate by local government in Lake County, Cook County, which is where it was held. You're supposed to wear a mask. All the workers were wearing masks. I have to tell you, 90% of the attendees at this concert were not wearing masks, and no one was enforcing it.
Yep, that's the problem with mandates. It's all about the enforcement. I do want to bring up one thing that Daryl Kangaroo put in here about avoiding conflict, I think. And he said, we turned off news shows in the club. So this is our 10th year of having, you're not allowed to have any news on. We haven't done that. It's been 10 years. And it was one of the smartest things we've ever done in our clubs was get rid of the news.
Two final points on this topic, Brent. One is sometimes it's not necessarily the member that's displaying aggressive behavior. Sometimes it's the staff.
Sure.
I was on a flight and I was shocked to see an altercation between a flight attendant and a customer. And it almost to me appeared that it was just a matter of time before this particular flight attendant was gonna lose it on somebody. She happened to come on the plane with whatever happened in the previous flights or whatever. She already had some stuff going on there.
Yeah.
So paying attention to your staff's demeanor, your staff's well-being, your staff's mental wellness, how they are, and making sure they're okay in their space is important as well. And making sure you're very clear that yes, you do need to help us enforce the rules and create discipline in our environment, but you do not need to put yourself in harm's way. And when to get out of the situation because their safety is most paramount.
And this happened in a club just recently in Virginia where one of the members actually slapped the instructor, the group fitness instructor that wanted her to wear a mask. And the HR department at the club didn't know how to handle it. So I would suggest every club out there, set your policies how you're gonna handle it. And one thing they didn't do is they didn't hold a group exercise instructor and personal training meeting on how to deal with these. So I love the idea of a full-blown training before the situation arises.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's move on, Blair, to the next, maybe a little more positive topic that you're talking about, behavioral health opportunities. Before we get too far behind.
So, and this comes from a conversation that I've been having with John Paul Bennett, who's the corporate sales manager for National Fitness Partners. They have 97 Planet Fitness in 5 different states. And he and I have connected on this and you know, looking at sort of all of the big data around the reasons people exercise, how that's shifting, becoming a bit more intrinsic. The 65% like to exercise because to reduce stress. One of the things that he has done is he has gone in and partnered more with the behavioral health side, and maybe even more specifically with the mental health side, which is a piece of the behavioral health side, and has said anybody going through therapy can have a free 1-month membership. Now, there's a few things that are, and here's the point on this. So right now they're partnered with 2 hospitals, 1 therapy practice, and 1 health management company. They got immediate traction with this. And I'm wondering if it's because sort of the prescription has to be so much easier here, right? Like any type of activity, we're not rehabbing a back. It's not post-cardiac rehab. It's you need to have exercise to augment the therapy to reduce stress, to help with depression. And so it seems to me that the transition from that side into, here, walk on a treadmill for 15 minutes a day. Let's get started doing that. And so they have gotten quick acceptance. And although John Paul is on vacation this week, he and I have been connecting, and we're going to try to bring this. I'm going to try to help him get this more to the forefront. I love that he said, I want to take off my Planet Fitness hat, my National Fitness Partners hat, and see what I can do to help the industry. So kudos to John Paul Bennett.
Yeah, two things on that. 2 points I want to make. Number one, Dr. Cooper and the Cooper Clinic have done a lot of research over the years, pioneers in sort of longevity and health. And what they will tell you undeniably, all the research points to is if we can move people from very poor category of fitness to just the poor category. Doesn't mean you're highly fit and you're incredibly active and running marathons and doing all sorts of things like that. Just from the very poor to the poor category, the benefits to your longevity and avoiding death from all-cause mortality are exponentially improved. Just need to get people to move a little bit. And then secondly, Cooper's just now launching some wellness programs they're calling Cooper Tracks that are targeted toward health clubs and giving them the tools to actually teach some ongoing sessions to some of the chronic disease issues like diabetes, cancer, arthritis, immunity, and COPD. So they're canned programs. They give the instructors the information and the training, and it'll help clubs move toward what they keep clamoring for, which is a sort of tie-in to the medical community and being part of the healthcare continuum. So if you're interested in that, you might check with the Cooper Clinic on some of that information. They're just launching those programs now, the Cooper Wellness Program.
Yeah, there's a thing you said there, Brent, that just goes to this whole behavioral change model and everything. And that's incrementalism. Don't boil the ocean, go one step at a time. If I take a net detractor and move them to neutral on my MXM medallion scores, I make a big gain in my performance. If I take very poor to less poor, if I take inactive to slightly active, think incrementalism, think slight movements in behavioral change across the spectrum.
On that point, is that people get to all the negative behaviors incrementally, right? I mean, right. If somebody is smoking 1 cigarette a day, then going to 2 is just a small change. At some point, people stop looking at where they started. They look at what they did yesterday and then judge how much of a change is it to today. And you do that enough times, and that change is huge, either negatively or positively.
Are you going to let Sara talk now?
On the lower end of the spectrum, going from a low level of health to a moderate level of health makes huge changes. But according to the Cooper Institute, when you go from a medium level to a high level, there's very little improvement. So our focus on making the fit fitter is kind of a waste. Just get people moderately healthy.
I think that's right. Absolutely right. So Sara, you need to drop back. All of you on the call need to drop back your fitness training.
Why? Thank you.
Well, we've said this before, we always tend to put on our technician hats when someone comes in front of us, and we're all contaminated with a lot of knowledge about exercise and what's the fastest way to get from point A to point B. And people mostly don't need that. Most people, or the people that are, and by the way, a lot of the people that are now paying attention to their wellness that didn't before the pandemic, a huge part of the population that is now going to be available to us to some degree. What they need is just to figure out how to fit it into their freaking day, in their daily life. And just let me kind of get in a groove here and get a pace going before you start, cranking it up and getting me with your drill sergeant trainer. And yeah.
Agreed, Blair. Really great point. Yep. Now, I think maybe one way to say it, Sara, and I like what you said, and it is so true. The more you work out, the greater the benefit will be, but the return on time invested goes down exponentially once you get past a certain point. I think maybe that's the lesson, along with everything you guys said. So Sara, another big emphasis is building community programs. That's next on the list.
So we have a video that we're going to play, or either that or Blair is going to start singing. I'm not sure when.
Yes, I might.
Well, what I really liked about all these programs is I think we're so focused and scared. Are we going to wear masks? Are we not going to wear a mask? Do I have to show a vaccination card? You know, when am I going to get open? Is my club going to be full? Is it going to be empty? I mean, we're all living on the edge there. But I think as facilities, if we can look beyond COVID as this huge impediment, and we can look beyond that, we have had time during the pandemic to look at inclusiveness and diversity. And that means I love like Revelation Wellness. I think it's a nonprofit. People love God, get healthy, be whole, love others. You know, getting outside of yourself and outside of the immediate makes people feel better. This is really cool. It's a 9-week online program. It's got Bible study. It's got a live 5-day retreat. It gives CECs from all the programs. It's really cool. Any club can offer it. And the Wounded Warrior Project is very interesting. And they take donations 3 different ways. They can take it as a one-time donation, monthly donations, or you can do an event that maybe does honor or memorializes something. Again, get beyond the immediate, get to something that we're sharing awareness as well. They're very into social media for the Wounded Warrior Project. Project Walk is very cool. And now this is really linked much more with the medical or wellness side. I'm sure that makes Bill happy. We've got specialists that we need to have, and they use people that are an exercise physiologist with a 4-year degree or a master's degree. And then they have assistants, and the assistants merely have to be certified in programs. And then they have aides, and all you need as an aide is to have a high school diploma. So you can actually work with individuals with disabilities, severe disabilities, and try to get them up and literally walking. Tai Chi Fit is cool, very cool. They work with the Veterans Administration and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And it's interesting because the government is subsidizing this. The government will pay $35 per veteran who's suffering, let's say, from PTSD, per student to the instructor or to the facility. So this can be a real revenue driver, and that's Tai Chi Fit that is doing that. Now, Way to Dance, of course, is body inclusivity and body positiveness. So individuals that are not these skinny minis who do HIIT training and all are members of Blair's Club. Okay, so these are individuals that are coming back off the couch, want to do something fun that stands. It's called BelieveToAchieveFit.com. And individuals can get certified, instructors can go through it. It's really kind of a cool program, and bringing it into your facility hopefully will grow your community. Rock Steady is near and dear to my heart. We ran this at the JCC that I was the group exercise director for. And they have a license fee, and then the instructors have to pay for certifications and stuff like that. But it's very cool because you can do a Parkinson's training, which really, you know, fighting Parkinson's has a double entendre with that Rock Steady. And that's really interesting. And then one of my favorite that was suggested by Bill was the Aqua Arthritis Foundation. And your aquatics environment is key to fighting COVID, because water that's chlorinated or has bromine in it, when you're immersed in it, it has 6 times the strength to kill the coronavirus as well as other bacteria and other viruses. This is according to the CDC. And the air circulation that I think Blair brought up earlier, it circulates every 6 minutes in your pool, because you can't have the moisture going on in the facility or you get all this mold. So the Aqua Foundation can actually work with your older adults. It's very safe. It's one-time certification. Any facility can have it. And the only requirement is you got to have a lifeguard on staff, and that they're cool community programs.
And are those available to club owners to just license those, or?
Yes. You don't have to own your own facility that offers it. The only one, Rock Steady, tends to be a little edgier, you know, because you need to have a higher level of education. But all those are available, big clubs, small clubs.
Here's one of my takeaways from what you're sharing there, Sara. We all want to impact the community. We all have audiences that we want to make a difference with. We all, or many of us, have a limited bandwidth of staffing right now. We all struggle with, hey, how do I curate the content for a new program, and launch that and go through that whole process. This is stuff that's on the shelf, ready to go, proven track record, mostly nonprofit driven, and makes a difference. So it ticks all the boxes: impact for the community, helping people, able to implement, not a big resource strain on the organization. I love it. I love it.
And were these spawned during the pandemic?
No, a lot of them were actually around pre-pandemic. And frankly, all of them were around, but a lot of them have really grown. Wounded Warrior program has expanded. Revelation Wellness has expanded. Way to Dance is in an extreme growth. They just opened On Demand, an on-demand area, and it says coming soon because they've been live streaming their classes into people's homes. So pardon the pun.
And these are just, you had a trouble getting the video to include as many as possible because there's so many more out there.
Right.
This is not a comprehensive list. This is some of the ones that are popular and on our radar, but there are so many others out there that are just as great and viable.
There's another one out there called Seat Fitness, SEAT fitness.com, and it's chair fitness for older adults. So if you're going to begin a program and you have been sitting, it's something you can do.
Yeah. My work with the WHO over the last year, these are exactly the kind of programs they're hoping to see our industry sort of embrace so that we can be more of a resource in the community rather than just a membership option for them. So I think all those are absolutely great. So people are probably wondering what McFitness is all about and why in the world we would link McDonald's and fitness together. So McDonald's has started a monopoly promotion in the United Kingdom that includes fitness prizes for the first time. And these prizes are guest passes to fitness centers, 50% off a week's pass, a free day, 3 months free for, I think, 8 people, 5 chances to win a year free at certain health clubs in the United Kingdom. So it's very interesting. Some people get, kind of were a little offended, like, wait a minute, the health and fitness community of the United Kingdom is partnering with McDonald's. But as we've said so many times already earlier on in this show, we need to reach audiences in a different way. And we need to reach audiences that we haven't effectively reached in the past. And a lot of those people are people that go to McDonald's. So through this giveaway, they're going to be touching or giving over 7 million people the opportunity to win these sort of health and fitness prizes. So before you ask, it hasn't made it to the United States yet. McDonald's has not decided if they're going to, roll that forward over to the US, but it's pretty cool that McDonald's would even consider that. And the United Kingdom, has an appetite for that. As we've said before, one of the silver linings, and Bill's going to talk about silver linings later, but one of the silver linings of the pandemic is this sort of heightened awareness from the general public and elected officials and government agencies around health and wellness. And this is a pretty unique approach about sort of gamifying this thing about fitness.
So go ahead, Sara.
I just think it's great. We need to go and get the people that are going to McDonald's. We need to get them fitter. I don't think there's any conflict there. You look at the new CEO of IHRSA, came from the candy industry. This is cool. This is cool.
I think it's part of sort of mainstreaming fitness. And as much as we'd like to think we were mainstream, we weren't. But I think this pandemic has given us the opportunity to be mainstream. So to me, I'm always looking for the kind of the principle behind why they would do something like that, and if that principle could apply elsewhere. The answer is a huge yes. And I feel like the opportunity for us to be more mainstreamed. I think right before we came on, we were talking about another program called Kids Strong. What another great opportunity to mainstream as fitness has been taken more and more away from schools. Pandemic has created more and more focus on fitness, including kids' health and kids' mental well-being because they've been out of schools. I bet, and part of the reason those community programs probably grew so much is people are just kind of craving this. So it's a mainstream opportunity. I love that.
Yeah, exactly.
And we have
go ahead, Sara.
Well, we've mainstreamed more. I mean, I think part of McDonald's responses to the Impossible Burger, the plant-based burger that Burger King did. So they're, you know, who would have thought McDonald's would be offering salads? So I think they really are McDonald's has always kind of been in the forefront of trying to go along with what society wants. And I think
there's a bigger lesson here as well. Don't judge people. Like when you say McDonald's to a typical fitness enthusiast, I mean, oh no, McDonald's, we're all in it together. Don't judge lifestyles, do what you can to support. And I love the reaching the broader audience, Brent. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
It's that incrementalism we were talking about, right? You first have to engage people somehow, and you got to move them, just got to move them a little bit. And when you're moving millions of people a little bit, I mean, that has huge impact.
And meet them where they are.
Yeah, that's a good word. Meet them where they are. Exactly, Bill. Yeah. Reach out to them. And Blair, we all keep using fitness. And as we've talked before on this show, for many people, the word fitness conjures up a really negative connotation, like a chore or something unattainable. But just being moving, being physically active is a big step that we just need more of the population to take, of course. We all know that. But this is maybe a strategy toward making that really happen.
Well, it's like, I agree with you, Brent. We look at it and it's a workout, it's a workout, and this work is terrifying. I want to use another W word. I want to use wellness. That's got such, it sounds like everybody's well, and, it feels good. And I think it's great that larger corporations are making this type of statement. And I hope it comes to the United States. I hope it comes to Chicago.
Well, I think that's a pretty good way to move into our next topic, and let's bring the slide up, and I'm gonna talk through. There's going to be a lot of words on your screen when this comes up. Don't worry about that. I'm going to kind of talk through this. This also comes from McKinsey. By the way, we should all be very delighted that McKinsey's leaning in this hard into fitness and wellness, and we'll share a link to a 6-minute video on McKinsey talking about the wellness space and how people break it down into 6 key categories, and the second category is fitness, and as a key driver of that wellness space. They say that there are 4 archetypes that we need to think about in our industry. The wellness enthusiast is that is somebody with an exercise habit. They're generally thinking more holistically about their health. They may participate in multiple things inside and outside the club. That's probably high likely to be a hybrid user of classes that they're used to. So they don't like radical new offerings. They like incrementalism. They like the incremental innovation. So, Body Pump 798 is an incremental innovation compared to 700 and, whatever. Okay, that's one group. The next group are traditionalists. They also have an exercise habit, but they look like, I come in and I do one thing. I do the 5 o'clock Zumba class every stinking day. The guys that's doing the same circuit that he did 20 years ago when he came into your club. Traditionalists, and they are extremely loyal. They're hard to get from others, but they are extremely loyal. Now, there's a whole bunch of them that have been orphaned out there, and they're going to be looking for a place. Researcher experimenter, that's 10% of the people coming into our clubs. They're hard to keep, and they're always looking for the latest and greatest and shifting around a lot. Passive participant. This is the reason that our attrition stays roughly the same across the industry. The passive participant is almost always affected by something external, causes them to come in. Some of the traditional questions that we've always asked, what brings you in? Well, I have a class reunion, I have a wedding, I want to lose 20 pounds. They are almost always extrinsically motivated, and moving them to intrinsic motivation will move them to one of the other categories. So this is one of the big points that McKinsey's making, is how do we engage the passive participant? What we've been talking about with, they lightly consume fitness. And that's probably what a lot of people might see from that McDonald's campaign. A few things they say about the industry. And go ahead and move to the next one there, Emily. One thing that they say is that, without a doubt, all their research shows that when you create belonging and community for consumers, it greatly increases loyalty, word of mouth advocacy, and higher lifetime value. End of story, right? Like they're all about creating community. Okay, a few other things about the industry. They say it's one of the few industries that they call a yes and industry. So the fitness consumer is not only going to, as they say, gyms are going nowhere. That's going to be part of the appetite for that fitness consumer and for the growing fitness consumer, but they're also greatly expanding their use. Hybrid, we all know that. An example of why it's a great strategy and why it helps the fitness industry that they give when somebody like, for example, has a Peloton. Because if I'm late leaving work and I can't get to the class or meet my training partner, I can still go home and do a 30-minute ride. They said the key thing about that is I keep the habit going. That I've said for a long time, if your only strategy is having a health club membership, you have a bad strategy. You should have some really good home gear so you can keep the habit going. So they think that you should also partner with providers of complementary offerings. Go back to what Sara was covering off on with community building programs inside your clubs. One more thing, then I'm gonna turn it over to you guys. Article in Fortune magazine this morning where they're talking about the Great Resignation and why so many people are shifting jobs and that. They said there are 3 things that keep people in a job. This is research done by a guy named Holcomb, and those 3 things apply in 2 worlds. It's fit. Do I fit with the culture and the values and the expectations of this company? Links. Do I have friends? Am I linked to people within this company? And sacrifice. What do I give up if I leave? And they say that's how people stick to their job within a company, but then they also apply those things to the community in which they work. What's it like in my neighborhood? So the same thing, fit, links, and sacrifice. We should pay attention to that in our businesses. What is the fit? What are the linkages? And what is the sacrifice? Turn over to you guys.
I do think, I love McKinsey and I read all their stuff. And when they were talking about what's going to happen like in 2030, they were talking about fewer doctors. So they said there's going to be more physical therapists, and the physical therapists toss people over to the personal trainers. And then the personal trainers, of course, never want to lose them, but people for economic reasons end up drifting into group exercise and then maybe drift into doing some things on their own. So I think that's kind of interesting how a motivation from, let's say, an injury or a recovery can make them into a member. And I think that'll also pull us closer into the medical community and into wellness.
There's interesting when you say that, Sara, because it piggybacks on what we provide as services, right? In healthcare, they talk about self-care, that in 2030, you're going to do a lot more self-care based on technology and at-home devices and biometric readers and so on and so on. But again, that's going to have a bigger impact and appeal to intrinsically motivated people versus extrinsically motivated people. So what is your product line for those that are intrinsically motivated versus extrinsically motivated? Like, how do you approach those consumers in a different way? And I think Blair's hitting upon that. I mean, you got 4 cohorts and you don't approach them the same way. And so, how do you help the self-care? How do you help the true care? How do you help with regard to your product line and your facility and your support system? So, looking at it from that lens can offer profitability and success for your patrons and outcomes.
That's right.
Yeah, it reminds me, just going back to the title of it, Intrinsic Motivation. Michelle Seeger, who we referred to many times, she's on the IHRSA Medical Science Health Advisory Council, says, think of exercise as a gift and not a chore, a gift to yourself and not a chore. It's all about intrinsic motivation, right? What's your immediate rewards you're getting from it? And just that whole concept, I think, is something that may appeal to an audience that we're not reaching or haven't reached that effectively.
Yeah. This kind of leads us into find your MVP. that's interesting. The first thing that pops up at me is says, don't give it away for free. And Blair was talking about offering 1 month free to individuals that are, to get them to come and try your gym. So I do believe in that. But we do have to look at what is our most valuable product. Is it our teachers? Is it our trainers? Is it the comfort we provide people, the feeling, a little bit of extra luxury? But people are looking for something real and honest and dedicated to a few. They want to feel that comfort, not the fluff. And I know, Bill, you didn't want to call it the meat. I can't remember what term you used, but it's what really is your MVP. But I look at this and I want to be able to offer all these wonderful programs and offer something, not the bells and the whistles, but make everybody feel comfortable. But how do I keep my business going when I find my most valuable product? Where do I spend my money on? And you've got to invest very cautiously and very carefully, because you've got to maintain a cash flow. And we talked about this. 1 week you're wearing masks, the next week you're not. People are coming, then suddenly they stop. Remember, people are freezing their memberships. Suddenly they're, reinstituting it. You've got to watch your cash flow. 82% of businesses fail due to proper cash flow management, because we get so excited that something's working well. And it's not just your balance sheet. It's not just your income statement. It's about how much is coming in today. And you have to look for patterns and look for trends. We have no patterns. We have no trends. We're in uncharted waters. And I think we should look at scenario planning. What's our best case scenario for this month? What's our worst case scenario? And because predictions really aren't going to work, because it's September, but last month in August, it almost felt like January, the way people were coming back. And now we're almost entering December, and it's 3 weeks later. So hiring carefully is also very, very important. 39% of recruiting managers and HR professionals say that they have lost productivity. Their facilities lose productivity as a result of a bad hire. And they claim that 11%, it costs them 11% in sales just from a bad hire. So where are we spending our money? We really have to watch for it. We have to separate personal from professional. I know we want to look at our most valuable product. What's our mission? What's our passion? But we really have to try to balance it. So how do you do that?
Yeah, and you used MVP. There's also minimally viable product, and people should think about that. There's a great quote from a sculptor that said, when asked, how do you carve an elephant? He said, you take a hunk of marble and you take away anything that doesn't look like the elephant. And if you really understand your strategy and purpose, you can kind of do that. And I think a lot of us have done that during this. We don't offer a lot of services in our club, but what we say is what we're going to offer, we're going to do really, really well. And we don't have to add everything, right?
Yeah, well, that's a precursor, right, Blair, to a coherent strategy, which is you learn what to say no to almost more than what you learn to say yes to. And that really helps define who you are. Bill and I have had the pleasure of teaching strategy at the IHRSA Institute for years. And that's where people get so caught up trying to be everything to everybody rather than finding their niche. And to your point, Blair, which I've been to your clubs and y'all do it so well, you identify who you are and you try and be the very best at that. And you don't try to be something you're not and just cater to every whim that somebody passes along or tie on to every trend that's coming down the pike.
Exactly. You can find yourself with an accidental strategy when you do that. You look up and pretty soon, the way you interpret what you're doing, you'd have to say, well, that's not what you think your strategy is. You're not really executing. Yeah. It's something different.
Yeah. Michael Porter does a lot of great work on that topic, as we all know. And, good strategy to what Brent just said is saying no to good ideas. So you can keep doing the good ideas you already have. And, if you got a better one, switch them up, but don't try and do them all.
Yep.
Yeah, and then I'll close out this subject if I could by just saying, Sara made a good point about forecasting and sort of predicting the future. And in the discussions with our roundtables, it's time of year right now where people are preparing their budgets, right? Their financial forecast for 2021. And the reality is everybody comes back and says, who knows? Nobody knows where this is going. So it's a work in progress. The old days of having a 1-year financial forecast and a 3-year forecast and a 5-year forecast, we're lucky to know what's happening next month.
That's right.
Next week.
All right, Bill, silver lining, sir.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big topic because, you look at what good came out of all this, and depending on glass half full, half empty, if you've lost a loved one or a friend, there's not much good that's come out of this, no matter how you slice it based on grief and loss. But as humans, we've got to always seek to learn from our experiences, right? And power through those to learn how to adapt and be better. So kind of looking at some of the things that came out of this that were somewhat positive in framework. And one that I came up with, that I didn't find in any of my research was, I did, but not in the way I'm going to describe it, was this personal inventory and self-awareness. Prior to the re-shutdown or resurgence of this, I had an incident where I parked in a parking spot that was reserved for dry cleaners, and I was going to get a haircut. There were no other cars in the parking lot. And the gentleman that owned the dry cleaner came out and said, I can't park there. And I looked around and I go, there's no cars anywhere. And he goes, that's my spot. And I really reacted embarrassingly poorly, because he wasn't being reasonable from my perspective, not letting me park in his spot when there was a million spots available right there in the front. And so I might have said something not kind. I was definitely not my normal, calm, nice, polite self. But I moved my car one spot over where there was no sign, and I got my hair cut, and I came out and I actually started tearing up at how this was such a negative experience for me and for this gentleman that owned his dry cleaner that was also struggling with the survivability of his business. And during normal times, he has to fight for parking spots because there's so many other businesses in the parking in the complex. So I went into the dry cleaner, and I didn't go all the way in because I didn't want to come off as aggressive. I just opened the door and said, hey, can I say something to you for a second? And he goes, yeah. And I said, I need to apologize to you. I said, I'm having a bad day and I reacted very poorly and I was wrong. And I'm literally tearing now. And by the end of it, he was apologizing to me and asking if there was anything he could do to help me. Mm-hmm. Okay. I felt like I was the problem. I parked in a spot and I didn't politely just say, yeah, I'll move my car. And by the end of it, we were both very emotional and trying to figure out how we helped each other. And so one of the silver linings for me in some of this is looking at this self-awareness. What does trigger people to react poorly, and what do you learn from that? How do you regroup and reset? And so I wanted to share that because it was kind of dramatic with, wow, that's not me. That's not who I am. But it had a nice outcome. When I look at the research, there's a few things that generically have been positive in all this. One, cleaner air, cleaner oceans. We've got a little less pollution. Definitely during the initial shutdown, you saw the pollution and air quality go up in the short term. People working from home, people getting closer to family and friends, a new interest to Blair's point earlier in personal well-being. People are more tuned into what their personal well-being is. Supporting local businesses, supporting local community, people feeling more community oriented. The healing power of pets have played a big role for a lot of people through this. And then the importance of remaining hopeful and optimistic. And so, as we all go through this, we're resilient creatures and we adapt, but trying to find the silver linings in some of that. And I'll turn it over to my colleagues to maybe share some of the things you've learned through this process about yourself or your business or your outlook.
Well, first, Bill, thanks for sharing that personal story. That's very vulnerable and was a good message for everyone to hear. I appreciate that. Yeah.
I think hopefully people that are in leadership positions have recognized their own grit in all of this. And because if you if you don't have resiliency and grit, then you don't have what it takes to really lead. And I took on a mantra for myself years ago when we opened our second club and the recession hit, and it was horrible. Up at 3 o'clock, wondering how everything was going to get paid, and I used to tell myself every day, even if it got worse, this is going to be an epic comeback story. This is going to be an epic comeback story. And being able to say that constantly, I tap into that mantra often, and I'll tap into that for our industry too. It's going to be an epic comeback story.
I kept singing "I Will Survive." That was us. I remember when we decided we were going to go live stream, and there were no programs out there to run a live streaming event. And I said to my staff, "Can we do this?" And they said, "Oh yes, oh yes." So we began advertising, we set it out, we did everything. And then about 2 weeks in, we have all these hundreds of registrations. My creative director calls me up, he's like, "Sara, the program's not working." And I'm like, "You mean we've been advertising something that you never even built?" And that's what we had done. And they just dove into it and they built this. And I had to, a lot of times, you stick your fingers a little too far in to where they're going to get chewed off. I just had to pull back. And I thought, I'm almost shaking here. How are we going to do this? And to see these people who are all working out of their homes, just digging in, and the emails flying all like half the night, and they figured this stuff out just from pure grit, pure dedication. It worked. The whole thing worked, except the first 5 minutes, the whole program crashed and they had a backup plan, and I'm freaking again. And they lifted it up. So the others around you that lift you, that's very heartwarming.
Yeah, I started when I stepped in as CEO of IHRSA on an interim basis to help out. I started a lot of presentations I gave with this quote: "Crisis breeds progress, inventiveness, and bold strategies." And man, looking at all of my colleagues around the industry and what they've done with their businesses, their gyms, their studios, their clubs, and how they've adapted. And now hearing, to Blair's point, these great comeback stories, many of them are doing really well. I mean, they are positioned now, they're lean, their margin of profit is going to be better in the future, undeniably, than it was going into this. I mean, it's painful. We would never wish this on our business, all the club closures. An unfortunate reality is our industry was kind of due for this sort of market course correction. And it does provide opportunity for those that are seeking it. And man, our industry and the way people have stepped up with their businesses and sort of repositioned them is just amazing. Congrats to all of you that have done that.
Yeah, there's a saying that goes along with what you just shared, Brent. Breakdowns lead to breakthroughs.
Yeah,
and the grit that the industry has shown has been big. All right, I think that brings us to the recap, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll make this quick, and then we'll go into Q&A. But we hit 9 topics, and we bounced around and covered a lot of ground. Brent, you talked about the GYMS Act and the correction on the stats, 22% overall. Still need everybody's support. Stay on that with the GYMS Act. Keep following it, and we need to keep moving that boulder, up and over the hill. To Blair's point, it is brilliant that we now have awareness and a seat at the table with regard to more exposure for IHRSA and our industry and collective industry than we've ever had before. So thanks to Brent, thanks to Blair, thanks to so many others, Gail Landers, Kevin McHugh. I mean, so many people out there, Jim Worthington, the list goes on and on and on, the IHRSA staff, on helping us to get that voice more prominent. Blair covered living with COVID, looking at Q4 to Q1 before we start seeing some more stuff based on McKinsey research. McKinsey is a resource that we all should be tapping into. Let's encouraging that nobody's talking about closing businesses right now. We're managing against severe illness and death in the future, potentially more like flu management than we were on caseload. So some of these things may be new normal, but they are showing some positivity with regard to living with COVID and managing through this. I talked about discipline in the clubs, having clear expectations, having clear support and training for your staff to support the members and create de-escalation and positive environments, also staying safe. Blair jumped into behavioral health, and that's a big topic. Behavioral health opportunities, how general fitness can move the dial for pretty much everybody. And then we hit incrementalism, going from very poor condition to less poor condition. And whatever you're going after, looking at it in an incremental fashion with regard to behavioral change. Brent jumped in with some research from Cooper along the same lines. Sara came in with community building programs. Tap into the community programs that already exist. They have a proven track record, they have efficacy, they have market credibility, and they're designed to do the right thing by outcomes for people. So look at those community programs so that you can help. We got a note from Pam O'Donnell from IHRSA during the conversation in the chat box, reminding us that the IHRSA Foundation, IHRSA.org/foundation, also has program resources available there. Brent covered McFitness. How do you reach a broader audience? How do you look at what McDonald's is doing to create activity through fitness passes and access in the UK? And don't ever forget gamification. People like to have fun and are motivated by gamification. So kind of learn from McDonald's on making fitness more accessible without judgment. Then Blair jumped back into intrinsic versus extrinsic, and he gave us the 4 cohorts from that: the wellness enthusiast, the traditionalist, the researcher experimenter, and then the passive participant. That passive participant is that externally motivated person that causes our attrition to always stay around that same amount. So look at the cohorts that you're trying to address and try and work with regard to that, because it will affect self-care and hybrid models and how you work with people. Blair also cited the article Great Resignation, and the things about workforce also apply to membership subscription models and behavioral change. 1, is it a good fit for the person? 2, are they linked to the product or the community? 3, if they don't have it, what is the sacrifice they make? So making sure you kind of think through those things with regard to why people might leave or stay. Sara talked about most valuable product, and Blair and I kind of went to minimally viable product, and back to the core. What's the core of your business? If you stripped away everything else, what's the fundamental core? And that might have shifted for some of us, from running fitness equipment to providing social, mental wellness, health, psychological support, whatever that might be. But what's your most valuable offering, or what is your minimally viable product from your core, and looking at that. And then we hit the silver linings aspect and a couple quotes. I love what Blair said. This is going to be an epic comeback story. I love what Sara said. I will survive. I'd like to add, have compassion. You don't know what somebody else is going through and what their day's like. Breakthroughs do create breakdowns. And Brent, I missed the exact quote you gave, but I'd like you to give it again to the audience because I thought it was pretty impactful. That quote about that you were sharing with us, before I said the breakthroughs lead to breakdowns. Do you recall what that was?
Yes. Crisis breeds progress, inventiveness, and bold strategies.
Yeah, I love that. And so with those profound words from Brent, that kind of gives you the recap there on what we've covered this morning, this afternoon.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. Well done, as always. So now we'll go to some of the questions. And another one is asking about a quote, which wasn't mine, but I shared it. It's from Michelle Seeger, the author of No Sweat. And her quote is, "Exercise should be viewed as a gift to yourself, not a chore." If you haven't read No Sweat, I highly recommend it. She's a behavioral psychologist and does a fabulous job about messaging and trying to create behavior change incrementally, as we've all been discussing. So that's where that quote came from. Let's see what other questions we have in the chat. Let's see, I have one here. It says, we were talking about IHRSA and the team being up in Washington, D.C. And somebody says, I heard IHRSA may have plans to open another office in Washington, D.C. And I can definitely answer that. Liz Clark, the new CEO of IHRSA, actually resides in Washington, D.C. And there is plans to, at some point, establish sort of a second office there. where they'll have at least a portion of staff, particularly around the advocacy component. So they're right there on the Hill to continue these conversations. So that'll be another big step for the organization.
Hey, Brent, on that topic of advocacy, because this is something that John Paul Bennett and I have been kind of going back and forth on a little bit too. There seems to be, and I know we think of advocacy primarily with government, but there seems to be an opportunity for us to do something bigger with the AMA or something like that as well. And I mean, as far as just even from this mental health standpoint and some of the stuff that is starting to get traction with them.
Right. Yeah. 2 points I'd make to that. Of course, I'm not, representing IHRSA anymore, but I still have a little bit of knowledge. So the IHRSA Foundation that Bill represented is working with the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation on some programs around mental health. Exactly. IHRSA's also hired a national PR firm out of the DC area to help us get some new exposure about our industry in a positive way. So they're reallocating a few dollars that may have in the past gone toward lobbyists, toward some PR campaigning. And I think that's paying dividends. We've seen recent articles, a couple in the Wall Street Journal and others in Politico. So again, things are really trending up on the advocacy front for our industry, thanks to the work of so many that Bill mentioned earlier. All right, let's see what other questions we have. Let's see. Where do you find a list of these programs? I've heard of some, but would like to know more. So Sara included a lot of those programs in her video. Perhaps we could put a few of those in the chat to give you a little bit of a list. And then, as Bill mentioned, you could go to IHRSA.org, look at the foundation, IHRSA Foundation page, and there's some programming there that you can access as well about services for the community.
Hey, Brent, can I speak to that for a second?
Yeah, Bill, please.
Go ahead, Sara, you first.
Oh, I was just saying, what I'll do is, I think one of the best things would be putting the links to their website, and
Okay.
we'll put it on how about on the IHRSA Facebook page?
Great idea.
Good, or LinkedIn, I mean. We'll do it on, do it on both.
Yeah, great.
The other thing is, if there's a audience that you're looking for a program around, let's say cardiac, diabetes, go to the biggest foundations that support those diseases and look and see what they offer, kind of like the Arthritis Foundation. So, look at the foundations that support those diseases and see if they have programs available.
Yeah, and I may have conflated a couple of the Cooper names. Cooper is a big campus with a lot of entities. The one that's launching the Cooper Tracks program is actually Cooper Wellness Strategies. So you can go to cooperwellnessstrategies.com and find out about their programs if you're interested in those. All right. Let's see. We talked about the gym closures already. We talked about the programs, clarified some of the quotes. Anybody have any other questions? Please drop them in the Q&A and we'll try and get them answered for you.
Hey, Brent, I saw one question there, which could you clarify again? It was 22% total, but
Yes.
What was the percentage of studios versus clubs? I believe it was 24% studios, 17% clubs, something like that. Can
It
you
was
clarify?
27% studios, 14% clubs for a total, average 22% closures.
Great, I saw that in there. Thanks,
We
Brent.
were chatting about that, and what we found interesting is so many studios are opening now. So I wonder about that. There's a lot of, franchises that are opening smaller facilities. I'm not sure if they're swooping in to some of the closed facilities that couldn't run, that were independent, and chains are going in.
Yeah, I think there's some of that happening. And just one more point on that, and I'll throw it over to you, Blair. Rick Caro, again, who helped IHRSA do the research and did the lion's share of the work. We've discussed about him redoing that again at the end of this year. So in December of this year, we hope Rick and IHRSA will perhaps do an update on that. We'll see where we are at the end of the year, for sure. Go ahead, Blair.
Well, this great resignation data is kind of top of mind for me since this morning, and people, and so you talk about all these people leaving their jobs, and one of the things that Holcomb says is people don't in a normal life, you don't kind of evaluate your job satisfaction 365 days a year. It takes an event for you to analyze your job satisfaction. Sometimes that's getting accepted to a graduate school, or it's a divorce, or it's a having to take care of somebody, or it's well, what's happened is everybody had an event. And so everybody at one time starts to evaluate their job satisfaction. Well, we got to remember that everybody's leaving their jobs, but they got to go somewhere, right? I mean, it's not like everybody stopped working. What's happening, and so I think part of what we're seeing in the fitness industry are people that are maybe leaving something they were less satisfied with. They've discovered they really like something in fitness. And I think we're going to see a transition inward of new personal trainers, new group fitness instructors, new boutique owners, I hope new entrepreneurs that just really have said, I want to do this because I love it.
You might be right. We're seeing a bit of a surge with certifications.
Oh, wow. That's
and
good.
So, yeah. Because there's, a lot of the frontline workers, the group fitness and personal trainers had nothing to do. So they drifted to find incomes elsewhere. And so I think you're right. I think new people may be entering the field.
Yep.
Yeah. And we have seen, which is very surprising. Unfortunately, one of my staff, his mother passed away, left in the house. He has to move, sold his old house, blah, blah, blah. 10 years we've worked together, 10 years. And he's going in another career direction. I was like, yeah. Whoa. And you said, what are the 3 words you said? What are the 3 reasons?
Yeah, it's fit. Is it a good fit? Culturally, values, expectations. Do I have links? Are there people that I'm kind of hooked into there? And then sacrifice. And oftentimes in jobs, sacrifice for things like great health insurance, stock options, those things, right?
Yeah, but I think the sacrifice is also, what am I missing? Life is short. What do I really want to do? I put my music career on the background, on the back burner. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm not going to be a designer. I'm going to go into music. And I'm like, you know what? Good on you.
Yeah.
Give it a go. Life is short. And if this pandemic taught us anything, that's what we've learned.
Yeah.
Let's see, here's one more. A lot of my contacts are not in their positions anymore, and I'm having to rebuild my network after 30 plus years. I think that's part of exactly what's happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I suppose that's even harder when just speaking from, I have both a, B2B business, the gyms, and B2C business, MXM. There's been a lot of shifts, a lot of key people moving from companies, and a lot of people moving out of the industry. Yeah.
Yep. Well, we're up against our time here at 15 past the hour. I just want to thank everybody again for joining us. Thank ABC Fitness Solutions once again, and thank my friends and colleagues for sticking with us and volunteering the time, which is not just the time when we're live on the camera. Obviously, there's some coordination with the IHRSA team, providing all the background support. They don't get the credit they deserve, helping create all the information, along with Sara's team, which takes the lion's share of creating all the great videos we have each time. So shout out to SCW team and IHRSA team and my colleagues, and please join us again. Our next one is going to be a live, we think, streaming show from the IHRSA convention and trade show here in Dallas, the week of October the 13th, 14th, and 15th. Please join us then. We're hoping to make that the best show ever. It'll be our first and only live show, so we'll see how that goes. Thanks again. We'll see everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Next month. Take care.